Did you had t-ball practice this morning, or t-ball baseball camp or something? What's going on?
No, church camp, summer church camp.
Church camp.
This
Oh,
week.
sick. Nice. Like VBS?
So, I don't think so. They didn't like, you know how usually VBS, like they promote it and like have all the decorations and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's not like that.
Huh.
It's I don't know. Heather signed him up, and
You dropped him
where
off.
all of his friends live, or not live, but where
all of
he
his
sees
friends live there.
All of his friends live at church.
No, well, like, I
Pastor.
mean, we've kind of been doing this homeschool thing, so like church on Sundays and
been
Wednesdays
doing
is like
this
the only time
homeschool.
that he hangs out with. Yeah, kind of.
can
Well,
imagine.
Heather's really taking charge of it. Like now,
Heather's
now that he's
really
actually
doing the
of
homeschool
age.
thing.
She
You're
is
not
doing
doing
it.
the homeschool thing.
By we, you mean
Yeah,
her.
I'm sure there's some subjects or something along the line that I will end up helping him with, but for now, it's Heather. So
That's awesome, though.
we did do some curriculum shopping. Speaking of homeschooling, and like the one that she found, they had like kind of like a placement test, like find out like where your kid is or whatever. And I was like, oh well, he's kindergarten age. Like we'll get the kindergarten curriculum, or she was going to buy the kindergarten curriculum. And so I look at this test and I'm like, he's been able to do all of this for like
Ever.
a year and a half at least, like, or more. And so I was like, okay. And then I pull up the first grade one, and the one of the questions is like, be able to count to 100. And I'm like, okay, well, he can't do that. So I think that's where he needs to be. Like, we got to start there. So
that's kind of nice that you can gauge that and start him where he really is ready for, rather than just kind of lumping him in with the general population and like, oh, this is kindergarten. This is what every kindergartner knows or needs to learn. It's like, dude, he's so far ahead. You're automatically disengaging
and
him
he's
from
so
school.
high strung anyway.
Yeah.
Like if he had to go
Wouldn't work.
sit through that, like he would lose his mind. Like it'd be worse for him than better. So yeah, I like the direction that we're moving. It's definitely going to be a challenge. We weren't homeschooled, so this is all brand new. We have no idea what we're getting ourselves into, really. I guess
you were barely regular schooled, Paul.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding.
Oh fuck!
No,
That's awesome though. I think that transition is being made pretty much across the board. I see a lot of my friends doing that with their younger kids, and I think it's awesome. I don't think there's any point in holding someone back and making them wait till a certain age till they have to learn something, you know? Think about how much further they're going to be ahead when they're 15, 16. Shit, they'll probably be done with high school by then, you know, and be getting life lessons and working and doing all those things. And it wasn't the thing when we were going to school, right? Homeschool kids were fucking weird.
Thanks.
when we were going to school.
Bro. We're the same age, and I was a homeschool kid. Thank you so much.
Point proven. Point proven. But you know, I wish that we would have done that and could have had the opportunity to be done with school at an early age and gaining life experience, and how much further I think that I could have been ahead if I would have learned all these lessons a lot earlier, rather than, I don't know, we were just stuck in that. There was no other option. That was it. You just go to school till you're 18, and then you go to college, and then then you work.
You can get so much more done in such a short period of time too. You know, instead of going to school for 8 hours, 6 hours, you know, it's 2 or 3 hours every day. We actually have made the decision to start homeschooling. We're going to send our boys to pre-K because it's 3 miles down the street, and it gives them a great foundation, a place to be able to go socialize a little bit, and they can do 2 years of pre-K. But Conley's going to start homeschooling, and they've kind of already started. She's you know, technically in the fall will be a first grader, but they've already started doing a little bit of workbooks here and there. And 30 minutes, an hour, maybe here or there. There's not a whole lot of structure to it yet, but she's going to work through the summer as needed. And what I love about it is just kind of what you guys touched on, is just the opportunity to be able to teach them real life skills and be part of their school. And like, I can teach her how to, probably have to take a refresher myself, but I can teach her how to change the oil in the car. Like she's going to know how to be able to change the tire on her horse trailer. She's going to be able to know how to do so many things that my wife didn't know when we got married, you know, which is crazy, as many miles that she'd hauled a horse trailer. And there's just, you can really customize the curriculum. And for anybody thinking that, you know, well, homeschool kid will just be behind, I know a lot that have gone on and gotten bachelor's degree, master's degrees, doctorates. There's one right near us, and he's in diesel mechanic school right now. He graduated last year at 17 from his high school program at home, and he's going to become a diesel mechanic. And by the time he's 19, he'll be able to start a career path, making as much money as he wants to, depending on where he's working. And he'll be able to, as long as he enjoys it, he'll be able to stay in that career path for 40 years. How cool is that?
Mhm.
I mean, that's super cool
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
I think
It
one of
is.
the biggest pushbacks from people that are like either against homeschooling or don't quite understand it is like,
Got to
oh,
be
well,
the social aspect.
it's the social aspect.
Yeah.
But like, if you think about it, you go to school, you see your friends for 5 minutes before class, and then they tell you to sit down and shut up the rest of the time.
I was
You
going to
don't
say,
get to socialize.
yeah.
Like,
And
you're
when
not
you think about it-
socializing at all.
No, you're not socializing. And what it's really doing is grooming kids to sit in an office from 8 to 5. So you get to, that's the norm. You get that as your everyday is sitting in this classroom, getting little 5-minute breaks in between and sitting down and shutting up and being told what to do. And I'd never thought about it till right now, but I'm like, that literally sets up the entire corporate world right there.
Well,
Yeah.
the public education system was developed like during the
ding.
early 1900s when
Yeah.
Rockefeller and those guys needed people
Makes
to
sense.
sit and work for 8-10 hours a day.
That just pissed me off for some reason. I don't know why, but it did. That makes me so angry.
Well, your kids are like
Makes me
mine in the
so
fact that
angry.
they're so plugged into whether it's baseball, you got stuff going on with church and your junior rodeos, and you got friends around there. It's not like they don't have social time. They spend so much time around other
Yeah, they
kids
have plenty.
doing
And
other
rodeo
things.
kids in general.
Yeah, it's
have-
not like
they have
they
like
don't ever get out. So
Yeah, we have like a reading time at the library for like 2 hours on like 2 days a week or something that they can go to. Heather's finding other like homeschool groups.
Yeah.
So like you can do like
Yeah.
these learning pods where like one parent will teach this subject, another parent will teach another subject. And so like they still get to do like the normal school thing if you want to, but you're not forced to sit in there for
And
8,
you're in
9 hours a
control of
day.
what they're learning.
Exactly.
yes,
Which is the biggest thing, I think. That's what scares me the most right now is all the, man, I watched something on YouTube the other day of this father getting up and reading one of the books that was in the curriculum, and it was insane. Dude.
Oh,
it's like
I
talking
watched
about
that.
sex and like
Yes.
descriptive, like
yes,
it grossed me out to the max.
Yeah.
His like daughter was 5 or 6 or something. It was
Yeah.
unreal, but that was a book that they were reading in every single class. I'm like,
Yeah.
no way, dude. I'm out. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not doing it. And I don't even have kids. So I can only imagine what you guys are feeling throughout all that.
And the other big application, while we're still talking about this, I know this has become the homeschool podcast, but like the other big application is like when I went to school or college, I wanted to pursue a business degree, but it was so hard to engage in the things that they were teaching because I had no idea what it took to start a business. So like after having that experience, I was like, if I would love to be able to teach my kid how to start their own business, get them up and running, let them fail a little bit. And then when they go to school for it, it's going to make so much more sense for them. Like they're actually going to be able to apply those things because they're going to be, they already have a business. And I remember in college, there was a couple foreign exchange students students from overseas, at least, that did own their own businesses. And I'm like, they probably understood so much more of that than I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Because
Got
they
way
had
more out of
already,
it.
their hands were already dirty in it.
Yep.
Like they were already in the mud trying to work their way out.
Yeah. When you're trying to learn things you've never done before or never had an experience with, it's impossible to take those things and imagine what they're supposed to do or put them to use. It's the same thing as when we go to OPA, getting those guys on a spur board, a bucket machine the first time. It's tough. It's like they've never been there before, so they don't know. Or getting to that 5th or 6th second of your ride, like 2 or 3 seconds, you're good, and then you start not knowing what to do. Well, it's hard to visualize that ride going well because you'd never been there before, right?
Yeah.
So all the things we learn in school a lot of times I think just go and don't mean a lot to us because we have zero experience where that can be a relation to us and how we can make that useful for our day-to-day life right then and there. It's like, yeah, when you're 35, this is going to be useful. Great. I really don't care when I'm 21, and that's what I'm finding is all the things I learned for this time in life, which would have been useful in college right now, I don't remember any of them. So it's just, learning them all over again. But I think that's a pretty cool thing. I'm stoked you guys are doing that, and we can kind of track it all here, on the podcast, their ventures and how homeschooling is. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the day to day, which like I said before, I have so many friends that are transitioning to that. And there's so much more freedom involved. And I think rodeo people have probably been doing that for a lot longer than most folks, and we've said a million times, rodeo kids always turn out way further ahead than most kids you see on an everyday basis. They have social skills. They're introduced to everything, and they see the world, which is, man, a great way to shape a life. Let's get into mental side of rodeo a little bit in a different way than we usually do. We usually, talk about mindset strategies, mental toughness. Let's just talk about a general attitude check and what that can do for a guy or a girl athlete going down the road, and how important it is to have a positive attitude about things, and kind of what can happen when we let that negative attitude seep in. You want to kind of get it started, Paul?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is my MO. I've got plenty of experience here. But with that said, I bet every single rodeo athlete that has ever been has also faced a lot of the same challenges. You're not unique if you struggle with developing and keeping a positive mental attitude. But the first time that I think I was ever introduced to actually trying to develop such an attitude was at a Gary LaFew school. That's his thing. He's always preaching positive mental attitude, positive mental attitude.
Does he have a definition of that? Does he have something he says it is, or?
He has there's a quote that he kind of runs through that's whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, enthusiastically act upon will inevitably come to pass. And so that's kind of how he sums it up. I don't know what the quote's actually attributed to, but he has posters and stuff with it on. But cool. They just doing a Google search, kind of trying to figure out people's different definitions of it. One was that a positive mental attitude is this philosophy that having this optimistic disposition in every situation in your life is going to attract positive changes and increase achievement. And I think that pretty much sums up what Gary's quote says. So, but yeah, that was my first experience with it, and I've kind of been I would say I've been full-fledged trying to improve that for the last 11 or 12 years, whatever that was, since that first time. And it's never something, I think once you get it, you have to also work to maintain it. Is probably the most important thing.
Absolutely, man. What are some, how does just a positive attitude affect your performance, your motivation, your overall well-being? Do you think it affects all three, or how would you gauge all those?
Yeah, definitely. So it's almost like your performance, your motivation, your overall well-being, those things that you said, you could almost see them as two sides of the same coin. And one of them you're looking through a lens of a positive mental attitude. The other one you're looking through a lens of a negative mental attitude, and you're going to get completely different outcomes depending on which lens you're looking through. And so with your performance, you might, so for example, not reaching the pinnacle in your performance, say you buck off at 7 seconds in the rough stock events. If you have a positive mental attitude, you're going to take away something that you learned. If you have a negative mental attitude, you're going to start dogging yourself and, having negative self-talk, and you're probably going to start a downward spiral of a dry spell there, because you're not allowing yourself to take away the wins. You're only focusing on the negative, and that's just going to manifest.
That's really important, man. Focusing on wins, you're going to win. You start focusing on losses, you're probably going to lose most of the time. I think a really good example of someone I always think of with a positive attitude is Casey Field. I think we talk about him a lot when it comes to that. His mindset, everything is top of the line. It's elite. But his attitude is, man, you don't see him with a negative attitude. No matter what happens, he has a positive attitude going into everything. And I think that comes from being confident in his abilities. He knows what he needs to do when he gets on each horse. And that's the same exact thing he did in the last one. And I've seen it happen, man. I've seen guys draw the same horse. I've seen Casey draw a horse, day one of the rodeo, and see the same guy draw him day 3 of the rodeo. And the horse isn't great on paper, right? Casey shows up, smiling, pumped up, knowing that he can do his job and do everything in his hands, and it's going to go well, or he'll get a re-ride, but usually it goes really well and he makes something happen on a horse that isn't getting marked. And I think a lot of that has to attribute to his attitude and his putting positive energy out there and knowing that, hey man, this is going to go well regardless. If this horse doesn't perform, I got another one coming. No big deal. Guy with the shitty attitude is going to show up. You're going to see that horse in his draw, look him up and say, F, F this, F that. This piece of crap, why am I even going? I'm going to go and get a re-ride. I'll pull him early or whatever. It's like, dude.
And they're beat
never
before
works
the
out.
latch ever cracks.
Yep, you're done. You're done.
Yeah.
So your attitude going into something is everything. And it definitely determines the outcome of what you want, or maybe what you don't want.
Absolutely. I think that you nailed it right there when you talked about Casey's confidence and his ability to believe. He has a deep-rooted belief in his abilities that really enable him to act on those things without having to overthink. He doesn't have to worry about proving himself to anybody, because he knows exactly who he is. He knows what he's capable of.
Mm-hmm. What are some challenges though? Like, what is the opposite spectrum of that? What do you guys have to overcome? What are some challenges of, not having a good attitude, or making yourself have a good attitude?
I think
what kind of creeps in, because you were kind of touching on it right there.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one for me is when I would not draw something that looked very desirable on paper. That starts it on Tuesday when I get stock draw. I'm thinking about that animal. I'm already starting that process. And when you would get stock draw, 72 hours before the first perf, that was where there was a decision to be made on how my mental attitude was going to be on the weekend, and ultimately that would determine the performance. And so a lot of times I had this negative outlook, as you guys have been talking about, on what's to come, because I was afraid of failing. I had this fear of failure, this motivation of fear of failure, which is the opposite end of the spectrum as a motivation to achieve success. And I was so afraid of not being able to prove to everybody else and to myself that I belonged to be there with Casey Field and Tim O'Connell and those guys, that I was always looking for an excuse or a way out. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that face guys is that stock draw, when they figure out, or at a rodeo, you get to the rodeo and you find out what bull you've drawn and he's unridden right then and there. And that split second, you have a huge decision to make that will ultimately dictate the performance and the outcome of that night, regardless of how much work you've put in the week before. That moment right there is the one that sets you up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then on the other side of that 8-second ride, so you're talking about beforehand, but then afterwards, probably the next biggest thing is frustration with performance.
Absolutely.
And there's a huge emotional toll of investing time and money and effort into getting down the road and trying to be the best at competition within any rodeo event. But when you don't achieve your desired result, if you have a negative mental attitude, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like that, this downward spiral occurs, because now you're doubting yourself, and then the fear of failure is now increased. You get your stock draw for the next one. Like, what's your attitude going to be? Like, if you don't break that cycle, it's just going to keep repeating, and you're just going down and down and down.
And it's funny when you think like that. You just keep drawing shitty ones. It never gets better. You're like, oh, I got another one. It just keeps getting worse. And the moment you kind of change that, it's wild and almost, it's weird how it can flip around, and then all of a sudden they start going right. And you'll see those guys that can't lose, quote unquote, they're always winning. Like, a lot of that has to do with their attitude and not allowing things to get them and really cause emotional debt is what that is. That worry, that fear, constantly thinking about something, which is anxiety, that'll suck it out of you quicker than anything. Getting your draw on a Wednesday or a Tuesday night and having to think about that till Saturday, dude.
Yeah.
You should have turned out Thursday. Like, you're tired and done already. So it's important, how your attitude is very important. So let's talk about some strategies about how we can enhance our mental attitude. What are some techniques you guys have used in the past or you seeing clients use?
One of the I just want to share this one real quick is one of the main things that I would do personally is if I did catch myself in that downward spiral, or you throw together three or four bad outs and it's like it feels like the world's coming down, I would honestly take some time off. Like let myself reset, because if I continue on that trajectory, like it's not going to be good. I'm going to run out of money. I'm probably going to get hurt. There's just a lot of bad things that can happen in rodeo, and they will all come to fruition if you're not keeping your mental attitude in check. And so having some time off and then doing things in that time that is going to ensure that when I do come back, I'm not going to be on that same trajectory. I'm going to basically take time off to reset my mindset.
That's really
I love
important.
that.
I think during those times too, you're probably pretty beat up as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
taking that time to rehabilitate yourself, your mind, all of the above is going to be really, really essential. Something that I fought all the time was negative self-talk, and I would get in that loop so quickly about just not being capable of doing it. And the way I got out of that was I actually read a book about the law of attraction, and it was a secret. I think probably a majority of people have heard about that. It's not, it's not a secret book. It's pretty famous, but it works really, really well. And something they talk about is just consciously correcting your train of thought. When you have those negative thoughts come in, you can correct that and make it a positive version of what's going on. So I always try and do that, and I continuously try to do that, and it works. But it is something I have to practice. It's something that without the practice, I never would have noticed it. But because I've practiced it for years now, I notice when I'm getting in those negative headspaces and I'm getting more frustrated with things, and I can stop myself a lot sooner than I used to be able to and say, hey, like, what are you, is this worth being upset or frustrated about? Can you really control this? No. Okay. What can you control? I feel better already. Let's keep going. So that's something I always worked on, and I'm continuously working on that because it matters far beyond the rodeo arena. It matters in life and business. Imposter syndrome is another really, really big one, I think, that a lot of people deal with. And again, negative self-talk and that are tied together, I think. But you just don't feel like you're capable or that you are valuable enough to achieve the things that you could even have them and not feel that way. Right. So being able to turn that around in your head and make it the way you want it to be is very, very important. And so one of those, skills I would say is be conscious of what you're thinking. And if you're having negative thoughts, is that a valid negative thought, or can that be used in a positive way? And reword it, and you'll find yourself doing it. And I started when I worked in a restaurant and I was a server. I don't know if you ever waited tables, but you can hate people real fucking quick waiting tables. And I used to get in this headspace where like, just fuck these guys. Like, God, these people want sweet tea. And I'm like, and then one day I'm like, dude, that's your job. Like, that's what you do. Like, what do you they want things. That's your server. I'm like, okay, well, if I approach this with like just a smile on my face, and even if I'm eating shit, I'm smiling. I made so much more money that way when I was waiting tables. It was nuts. Like my tips would go through the roof. Like comparatively, I'd make half of what I did, if I was not in a good mood or not smiling. But it's just the way you approach things and put yourself into it is everything. And so you can be going through a shitstorm and smiling, and it's probably gonna turn out way better than you think.
Yeah, you're talking about that negative self-talk, and I was thinking about when I first started getting back on bucking horses. I took a 2-year hiatus, and I cracked back out in the fall of 2016, and I got on maybe 4 or 5 horses, and it had gone okay. And then I was like, oh, sure, I'm ready to enter Denver. So I entered Denver and get stock drawback, and I have a horse from Calgary called Explosive Skies. And this is kind of when that horse first came around. It hadn't been around a bunch. Yeah. At that point in time, the only video I could find on this horse was it 3 jumping Orin at the NFR when he had those busted ribs. And I was like, I'm going to die. What have I gotten myself into? And I remember I took off and I was meeting Sean Gibson on our way. Sean, I was meeting Sean Gibson on our way up to Denver. We were going to go together, pick up Cody Lamb from the airport. And I remember getting on the interstate, and it was late at night. And I remember thinking to myself and saying verbally to myself, I spurred. In the past tense, I spurred Explosive Skies. And every time I started to get anxious about what I was going to do, I verbally said to myself, I spurred Explosive Skies. I spurred the whole way to Denver. I got up there, and when I got there, sure, I was still extremely anxious, and I was still pretty nervous. I'm getting ready back there. I'm still internally there's some chaos going on, but I just kept saying I spurred explosive skies. I spurred. And whether she was pretty freaking nice that day, and I was like maybe 87 or 88 and 1 second in the round, and it was my 5th or 6th bareback horse back, and it was one of those aha moments where I was like, I can do this. I do deserve to be here. I belong with these guys and the best in the world. But it all started with that decision as I pulled on the interstate at 10 p.m. at night, and I started saying, I spurred explosive skies. I didn't say, I hope this goes well. I didn't say, I hope I don't die. I didn't say, I hope I just live through this. I said, I spurred explosive skies. And I said it all the way, 10-hour drive to Denver. And in that situation, I believe that played a role in my mental capacity for success at that rodeo.
It definitely did, man. It makes a huge difference. And I bucked myself off the same way.
Yes, me too, all the time. All the time. Well, how many times do you say don't get hung up, don't get hung up, don't get hung up? That's what we always talk. Don't get hung up, or don't whatever. And that's what happens is that whatever you focus on is what we bring.
It's so simple as to don't forget the keys. Like, don't forget the keys. You're going to forget those keys for sure.
Don't forget the podcast.
I need to grab. I got to grab those keys. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I'm bringing my podcast equipment. I'm bringing my podcast equipment. Oh, I actually got it. Yeah.
There's actually science behind why that works, and I think both of the strategies that you guys talked about are in outlined in The Secret, and then visualization is another thing that they talk about. But there's this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system, and it receives inputs and then gives us outputs. Yep. And so when you say like the medulla oblongata, when you say like don't forget my keys, like it receives the input as forget my keys. Like the do not, like it doesn't take that into effect. Yep. So when you think do not get hung up, it's receiving get hung up. Like that's all it's taking in. But when you say I spurred explosive skies, that's the opposite outcome of getting hung up. So like it's taking that and then it's going to do what it needs to do to try and give you that output. Is it going to work every time? No, because a lot of the factors go into that. Like, can you actually spur a bucking horse? Like you can't be, some guy off the street saying I'm going to spur explosive skies and enter Denver and get it done. Like that's not going to work. You have to actually put in the physical work that it takes to get there. But the mental side of that work is feeding your reticular activating system, like the actual inputs that it can use to give you the desired outcome.
Spot on, dude. Spot on. And like we've said a million times, these are all pieces of the puzzle. You've got to do all of the things, or else you have a puzzle with a couple pieces missing, and it doesn't look that good. It looks kind of good, but it doesn't look that great, you know? And all it is these little things that you just got to keep doing. And it's not laziness. Well, some of it's laziness for a lot of guys, but it's really just not knowing. And now the reason we have this whole show is for y'all to know these things and put them together and use them for the best of your ability and make your career, that much better. So take these tools, check them out, sharpen up your brain. Your attitude is everything. How you approach it is going to mean the world about how it's going to turn out to you. The last thing I want to bring up about mental attitude is the people surrounding you and your traveling partners. And we've talked about this a lot before, but if you're in a truck full of guys that are constantly negative and finding reasons that things didn't go well besides themselves, and they're constantly blaming other things, it's going to be really hard to win and hard to be successful in that group. Same way is you're surrounded by guys that are extremely positive, are hungry to win and expect to win regardless of what's going on. You're going to find that success as well. We've said that a few times on this show and a bunch on our social medias, but you're the product of who you surround yourself with. And if you surround yourself with losers, you're going to be a loser. Surround yourself
that's
with
not
winners.
To say that truck full of winners isn't going to experience all of these challenges or some other challenges, but
what makes them winners though?
Your odds of experiencing different challenges that somebody else has already overcome are very good. So if you have these positive guys that have already overcome the things that you're going through, they're going to be able to help you through that. If you're in a truck full of negative guys that, all they're looking for is an excuse to go to the bar and get drunk, that's what you're going to find. You're not going to be able to overcome your obstacles because there's nobody in there that's already overcome them. You know, there's no past experience to pull from. So that's huge.
If you're looking for those guys,
can't stress that enough.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you're looking for those guys, you've got to be one of those guys. I've had really great traveling partners. I've also had really bad traveling partners. I've been really good to travel with. I've also been really bad to travel with. And I learned more in my times of being grumpy, not wanting to leave the house, not being a great traveling partner. You have got to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. You've got to set the pace, not just tell the temperature. And so when you're looking for, there are going to be times you can't look to that guy that maybe is somebody you look up to, you've gotten in the rig with, and maybe he doesn't have a good ride and maybe he doesn't want to talk. Maybe you have to take the initiative to say, hey man, like, you know, you crushed it today. Like, we'll get him tomorrow, whatever it might be. But you have to set the pace for your rig every single day. Make sure that you're helping, leading the way, and staying positive and keeping that positive environment in the rig. And you will very quickly find your way back to the pay window.
Mm-hmm. And that is freaking spot on. And I think that to wrap this up, you know, having a good attitude, having good traveling partners are all part of it, but it makes me think of our sponsors, and your equipment are just as important as having a good attitude and having good traveling partners. And Beastmaster Rodeo is the one-stop shop for all of your professional rodeo gear. Whether you are a beginner or an elite level athlete, they have anything and everything you can need, from rough stock to the timed events. You can check them out at beastmasterrodeo.com. Use our discount code CHAMPIONLIVING, all one word, uppercase. Going to save you 10%. They have some really cool stuff coming out. All their new calves that they're tying, they're putting up new dummies for every event, which is really cool, and just really expanding the horizon for equipment and the standard for equipment, man, which is what I love about them. They're setting the standard and they're holding it high for everybody. So y'all check them out, beastmasterradio.com. Again, use our discount code CHAMPIONLIVING, all one word, uppercase, going to save your 10% on all their products. And until next time, we'll catch you later.